Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we will be discussing Tim Boyle and his kind of weird and maybe most unprofessional and most unqualified rise to make the NFL almost ever. And I think it's definitely an interesting topic, and I think I dived kind of deep into this one, and it's sort of very interesting and very unexpected and almost unexplainable. But before we jump into that, remember to like and subscribe. Look down below. You might think you're subscribed, but you're not actually subscribed. It helps out a ton, and without further ado, let's hop right into the video. So this past Black Friday, the first ever Black Friday NFL game, mind you, Tim Boyle started a game for the New York Jets against the Miami Dolphins, while the Jets ended up benching their former second overall pick, Zach Wilson. Now, not personally the move I would make. I think you have to develop your guys, and I think that really will ruin someone's confidence like that, who's really not playing that bad, and is just under a bad offensive system. I think it will eventually work out for Zach. We'll see. Definitely not the move I would make, but Tim Boyle ended up starting this game this past Black Friday. And as someone who's relatively new to football, I was curious about him, so I looked up his NFL stats. His career hasn't been anything spectacular. Only really thing to speak of is short stints with the Packers, Lions, and Bears, where he barely ever played, threw a couple interceptions, threw like 4 touchdowns. And he did start 3 games when Jared Goff went down in 2021, but they lost all 3. And it wasn't a very good Lions offense, so you can't really say much there. He was pretty bad though, and not really necessarily considered as a qualified NFL quarterback, and maybe a bad to, competent backup. But in the NFL, there's a bunch of not-so-spectacular backup quarterbacks, so, I wanted to look up his college stats, because maybe in college, Tim Boyle was super good, and I'm missing something. So I looked at his stats, and it was nothing short of a little shocking. You look at his stats, he passed for 1,200 yards in 25 games. That's really bad. 1 touchdown. 1. Nothing more, nothing less. And take a wild guess. 13 interceptions in 25 games and 1 touchdown. He was rushed in as a freshman. I couldn't really find the exact reason because, it's sort of a while ago now. He was rushed in as a freshman and really should not have been starting or playing college football as a freshman, yet he really needed time to develop, and I think that probably took a massive stunt in his growth, where Tim maybe could have been okay at some point, but I'm not really sure. I mean, maybe he was just going to be awful anyway. And so, that really rushed his development, and it kind of probably stunted his development in a crazy way. But another thought came to my mind. Maybe he was a good runner. Maybe that's the reason he played 25 games without going bench, or maybe UConn just had no depth at quarterback. In fact, Tim was not a good runner. He was quite the opposite. He had negative 122 rushing yards in college. Now, you gotta take this with a grain of salt, because sacks in college count towards negative rushing yards, unlike in the NFL. For example, rookie Will Levis last year, for Kentucky, had a negative 107 rushing yards, but he's honestly a pretty good rusher, a pretty good scrambler, and quite athletic. So in college football, rushing yards can be pretty deceiving. So after this terrible stint at UConn, one of the worst college football stints I've ever seen at a program, he ended up transferring to Eastern Kentucky at the FCS level, where he eventually got to start his senior redshirt year. So in his last year, in 11 games, he passed for 2,100 yards, which honestly isn't that bad. It's okay. 12 total touchdowns to 13 interceptions. That's not very good at all. I mean, you could argue that's pretty bad, especially for a guy who eventually made the NFL. So once again, I was confused. Instead of going forward in Tim's career, we have to track back once again all the way back to his high school days at Xavier High School in Connecticut. Now, up to this point of what we've seen, he's been bad in the pros. He was terrible at UConn. He was bad in the FCS level at Eastern Kentucky. So what do we need to see here for high school? I was expecting to see maybe some crazy stuff, because at some point, maybe NFL teams, the reason they're holding on to that little tiny bit of hope, for some reason, that Tim Boyle will show us what he had in his high school days. That's what I was thinking. I hadn't checked his high school stats up to this point, though, by the way. So in the class of 2013, Tim Boyle was a 3-star quarterback. He was ranked as the 42nd ranked pro-style quarterback, and he gained interest from some solid, decently big programs. Actually, one really big program in Florida, and then a solid program in Boston College, who's been iffy every now and then, but certainly better than UConn, where he eventually committed to. Now, in 11 starts in his senior year, he had 29 passing touchdowns, which is pretty good for 11 games, and 11 interceptions. Now, would it be something you'd think of a future NFL quarterback? No. I think you have to dominate high school football, and I think as a future NFL guy, I think when you're looking at future NFL talent, you would want to dominate. But I guess I could see as a college program, if you need a next quarterback up and a guy you can develop for a little while, that you could probably get to commit to your program, I could see why you might want him. So really hasn't been spectacular at any level, which is sort of what you need to be an NFL quarterback at minimum in college. So that brings us back to the question, how the hell did he make the NFL? So according to Gang Green Nation, this is the first little site and the first little source I could really find that really led towards anything positive on Tim Boyle in the NFL. This is a Jets fan community. Said, quote, Boyle, who has good size, is not a dynamic player, but surprisingly put up excellent workout numbers at Yale's Pro Day out of the 2018 draft. He ran a sub-4.8 40 in the 40-yard dash and managed a 35.5 vertical inch jump and posted solid agility numbers. So I scoured the web for like a good 20 minutes before I finally found some Tim Boyle Pro Day tape at Yale. Kind of crazy, but whatever. Kind of had to search deep for this one. And so Tim Boyle, compared to average NFL quarterbacks, had a above average 40-yard dash, actually, slightly, very, very slightly, an above average vertical, an above average 3-cone, and an above average broad jump, while everything else being average or below average. The only thing that was really below average was his bench, which was 16 compared to the average of 22. Boyle also possesses a pretty big frame in being 6'4", 232, which is basically both average or slightly above average for an NFL quarterback, which is something you sort of want in an NFL quarterback. You don't want them to be too big, and you don't want them to be too small. So, that's sort of an important thing for an NFL quarterback. Not too important, but something that an NFL quarterback, something that you'd be looking for in a guy who doesn't have any positives. Any positive you can get, you take with Tim Boyle. Now, watching his passing reps, he was honestly very impressive. He seemed to have good arm talent, he seemed to have a nice deep ball, really accurate, and only had a couple incompletions on some really wide receiver drops. So the first real positive we're finding here with Tim Boyle. And despite this, there was nothing really else to talk about for Tim Boyle. There's nothing to say for the rest of his career. There's no place where you can really watch his high school tape, from what I can find. And that's really the only thing that impressed me was a Yale Pro Day 5 years ago. But I guess a Yale Pro Day 5 years ago was enough to impress the Green Bay Packers enough to sign him to be their backup for a couple years. And he was fine as their backup, but it just amazes me that a guy who went from a single touchdown pass in 3 years ended up making the NFL and is ending up having a fine career for himself, at least, as a backup in multiple different places. It's so interesting where Tim has somehow made it despite being possibly one of the least qualified quarterbacks in NFL history, in modern NFL history, we can say. It's incredible. Tim Boyle in his college career had 14 total touchdowns to 26 interceptions, and 12 of those touchdowns came at the FCS level. It amazes me how this guy's in the NFL, and in fact, it amazes me the fact that the Jets made the decision to start this guy over a former second overall pick. It's incredible how somehow anyone in the NFL can manage to find a random way to make it into the league, and it's sort of shocking. Anyway, it was an interesting and very fun video to study and find out and research this guy who I think it's incredible that he's in the NFL. It was so interesting to figure out all this stuff about him. And with all that said and done, I hope you all enjoyed this video. It was really fun to make, and I worked pretty hard on writing the script and writing down all my notes for this video. I will link all the sources I found down below in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe. It would mean so much to me. It really helps out the content, and it really helps push these videos to more people. If you think you might think you're subscribed, but you might not actually be subscribed, so check down. Just make sure you're subscribed real quick. And if there's anybody you want me to cover in the sports world, please leave a comment down below. Any team, player, really anybody. Thank you all so much for watching. It really means the world to me, and I will see you all next time. Peace.